Alright guys, this is going to be take two. I don't have my microphone, as that's the reason that this is take two, is that it died in the middle of me talking about the reading wrap up. So this is take two of my April reading wrap up. Again, I've already done this once, the whole thing once, without realizing my mic was off. So we're going to do this again, and we'll see if I can maybe kind of shorten it up as well, because I was blabbing a lot. These aren't going to be in any order because I moved the books out of order when I was talking about them last time, and I don't want to go through and try to find the right order. So we're just going to start with this. I will say what rating I believe I gave the book, but the actual rating is going to be the one that is posted up on the screen, because I tend to forget what they are as I'm talking about them. I just have a general idea, except for the two that are 5 stars, which I'm going to talk about those first because why not? So I did read 9 books this month, and out of my TBR that I had, that I picked, I just picked random books for it. I read 8 of the 9, but I read 9 books. The only one I didn't get to was Blood of Hercules, and I just ran out of time, and I kind of just didn't want to. So that was kind of the reasoning for that. But let's start with the books I did read. And we're going to start with my 5 stars, because those are ones I can guarantee you that I know what I gave them. I know for sure and all that. So first one is The Bright Years. This is literary fiction. This one I have seen a lot of people love, and I was curious about it and I wanted to read it. And yes, I followed the little hype train and read it, and I 100% agree that this is a great book. I loved it. At first I was having some issues and I wasn't feeling it 100%, but then near the end I did. And this story follows Lillian and Ryan as they get together, they get married, and they start a family. But the thing is that Lillian kept a secret from Ryan, about having a kid previously. And I think that causes a rift. I think that's when it started, was after she admitted that. But it talks about some problems they go through. And then it talks about her taking care of her daughter, raising her daughter, through the trouble and the problems with her marriage. Then you get their daughter Jet's perspective when she's older, and you get to see her dealing with her own issues and troubles and problems and stuff. And then the very last perspective is Ryan, which is the dad's, and you get to see him kind of near the end of his life and talking about his regrets and his struggles and all this stuff. And I was struggling with it a bit. I get the idea and the premise and stuff, but I was struggling with it a bit, and I wasn't going to rate it as high because I didn't see it. But then once you get to Ryan's kind of perspective, I was starting to feel, I guess it's one of those things where whatever I was dealing with, it kind of hit home with what he was dealing with. And although it's not same, I wasn't dealing with a drinking addiction or anything, but it kind of deals with regretting stuff or missing out on stuff, or trying to find a way to have it where all the stuff you are dealing with, although it's hard and troubling, kind of pushing it aside so you can be there for the others. So this one did become a 5 star. It is a hard read. There is a lot of kind of triggers, and I believe she might mention something about it. I don't know. I don't remember. No. But there are some stuff that's kind of triggering, maybe a little more difficult and harder to deal with. Grief, alcohol, abuse, kind of violence a little bit. Kind of bulimia and other stuff as well. So those are kind of some stuff that I noticed in the book that are kind of triggers that maybe some people might not like or may struggle with. And I'm sure there's more that I forgot. But this was a really good book. it was just also a little hard-hitting as well, which I think is good because it's heart-wrenching, but then it also like warms your heart and you see like the growth in the story. So next one is Go Like Yourself. This was my other 5-star, and I know it's weird and some people might be like, what? But I love this book, and I'm going to explain briefly as brief as I possibly can. So Go Like Yourself has to do with Chris. He's a college student. His brother takes over the job of Santa Claus from his dad, and Chris is trying to help his brother because he's always been there for his brother. He considers himself the spare brother of Christmas. Like, he's just there, but he doesn't really have a purpose. But he goes there, and this is actually book 2. The first book talks about a problem where they find out that joy was being kind of stolen from other holidays. And here they find out that their joy is being stolen from someone in St. Patrick's Day because they find a shamrock. So they have it where they're going to send Chris to go meet with Lachlan, who is the Prince of St. Patrick's Day. He was supposed to be kind of the king, but his uncle kind of made it where he had a bad reputation and bad image presented. And so the uncle took the holiday from him, kind of. And so there's some tension there. But I really like this one in the sense of that, like, Chris had a lot of, like, vulnerabilities and issues to where he's trying to, again, he thinks he's the spare brother. No one says he is, but he thinks it. He's always there trying to help his brother, organize things for his brother, help his brother do this and do that. He's always trying to prove himself to his father and to his mom. And, like, there's a lot of stuff that he's dealing with that, like, he's trying to figure out, like, what it is for him, but he's struggling. And he struggles with anxiety attacks and panic attacks and trying to, like, believe in himself and, like, have a better, like, image and, like ego, I guess, or something, like self-image. His self-image is, like, needing repair. But yeah, he gets that. He gets a better understanding when he goes and visits Locke. And, like, Locke I loved because he was kind of an a-hole to Chris, but he explains later that, like, that's how he flirts, is by, like, saying mean things. And in one way it's bad, but in another way it's like that's how they were bantering back and forth, is that, like, they were pissing each other off, but, like, it was in a like a, not like a playful, but, like, also kind of like flirting way. But it was interesting and I loved it. And like I said, I really just felt like I loved the vulnerability that Chris presented, and then Locke kind of helping him realize stuff about himself, and then him going home and dealing with his stuff and all that. So I gave this 5-star as well. Like I said, I personally loved it. It was good. It was interesting. There's that. Next, we're going to talk about Joe Kenda, Killer Triggers. This is a nonfiction book. This one doesn't have a rating, so that's why I picked it next, is because I can remember that I didn't rate it because it's nonfiction and I don't rate nonfiction. If you don't know who Joe Kenda is, he's a retired police officer, or retired homicide detective from Colorado Springs, Colorado. And I am currently in Colorado and was born and raised most of my life in Colorado Springs. So that one is something. But he had a show called Homicide Hunter that went over his homicide cases and, like, talked about it and, like, gave reenactments and all this other stuff. And this book is kind of a lot of the cases from the show. So if you've seen the show and you read this, you're going to connect the dots and remember things. But this one's focusing more on kind of like the motives, the reason behind why people did what they did for these cases and stuff. And it does give little tidbits on other information or other things that maybe weren't discussed in the TV show. Like, some of it probably was, but I don't remember that. I remember the cases a lot. Like, all of the cases, I can get brief glimpses or ideas of it. But, like, some of the other information that was presented, I don't remember. So, if you like true crime and stuff, it'll go over it. It's not too gory, it's not too like graphic or anything. There's no pictures, so there's that. But it is kind of very similar to his show in the way he talks and stuff. And again, a lot of the cases in this book were on the show. So if you've seen the show and you read this book, you'll probably be like, hey, I remember hearing about that. So next we're going to go over this one because it's quick and easy. This is called Two Can Play by Ali Hazelwood. This one was originally going to be just an ebook, but I guess she published it traditionally for a book for people. So there's that. This one is about two video game developers. One is Viola. She is working for a small company to develop video games, and there's a video game that she's trying to get on that was based off of these books, and she really wants it, and the company or the people who own the rights to the book / game have decided to go with her company and another rival company and wants them to work together because her company does really good with developing like character designs and like styles and looks, but they're not so good at doing like fight scenes and stuff as the other company. So they have it where the big head honchos wants those two companies to work together, but they have a lot of issues and animosity and trouble with each other, like they're rivals in a way. And so the two head bosses of the two smaller companies thinks, hey, let's go on a retreat, try to get us to build like team building, but like have it where we can get together, see if we can work together, show this big company that wants both of us to work on their game that we can work together and do that. Viola is the head of her company and Jesse's the head of the other company, and they've met each other before, long time ago. And basically Viola doesn't get why Jesse like avoids her and doesn't like her and has issues with her. And then you find out, which that part was kind of interesting because it's like basically she forgot like this whole like part of a conversation and stuff. And then yeah, but I believe I gave this one either a 3 or 3.5. My only issue is that once they realized why they had like a conflict, it kind of quickly went from them trying to work together, trying to understand each other, do this, do that, to, oh, they can't keep their hands off each other. Oh, there's the plot gone, basically, and stuff. So it wasn't bad. It was quick and easy, but like once they realized their feelings, it just quickly went in a very different direction. And then the ending was just kind of like lackluster and boring, and like it didn't hit as well. So there is that one. Let's get this one out of the way next. This one is Just Friends by Haley Pham. If you're watching this video, you most likely know about Haley Pham. Haley Pham is a booktuber who's really popular and stuff, and she just wrote her debut novel, Just Friends, and it came out this year in March. And there's been a ton of people who've read and reviewed it and talked about it, and I'm gonna be one because again I did just read it. It was on my 26 books of 2026 that I wanted to read, and this only got I think a 3. And it's a second chance romance between Blair and Declan. They were high school sweethearts / friends, and then she goes to college, and the only reason she comes back after graduating college is because her aunt is sick and dying of cancer. And then she gets a job at a coffee shop that Declan manages. And yeah, this one I really wanted to kind of like, but like it was very slow. It was very hard to get into. There's some parts in it where I just didn't get why we had that information, why it was thrown in there, what the point of it was. And then some of it too, it's like they would have it where they would have a conversation and then like go on a completely different tangent where you're like, why did we go this way? What was the purpose of going this route? What was this? And stuff. And then like I really like the parts where it talked about the grief and struggles with her dealing with her aunt dying and all that. That part I liked. The romance, on the other hand, was boring. and I struggled with it, and I didn't really care. Like, when you saw the past of her falling for him, I was more interested in that. And then there's one other thing that, like, was pushing me to continue reading this, was that Declan had gone through an accident to where he had a limp and stuff, and I really wanted to know about the accident, and I knew there was going to have to be some sort of talk about this accident. And so that's what I kept waiting for. And then it came, and then, like, you saw him talk about his struggles with the accident, and that was fine. But then, like, again, it kind of just, there was a bunch of, like, not well thought out and, like, kind of, like, overplayed tropes and overplayed ideas, and, like, it didn't hit and stuff. And so, like I said, I really wanted to like it. I really tried, but I just couldn't. And there was parts where I was skimming because I just wanted to be done with it. It was getting to that bad. And I hate the fact of thinking that, but that's how I was feeling. So, sorry. But that one was not well received in my mind. So, next one is Full Moon Over Freedom. Yeah. This one follows Jillian, recently divorced. She was the princess and, like, the good girl of Freedom. But she gets divorced. She has 2 kids. She goes back to the small town of Freedom to try to get her life back together while dealing with her divorce, because she basically signed a prenup. And there's a lot of issues with it, to where, like, she doesn't get any money and she doesn't get this and she can't do this. And, like, he basically has control over her even after the divorce. And so she's trying to find a way to get rid of that, take care of that, not have to deal with that. And she goes back home, runs into Nicky. Nicky was the guy she knew in high school. She was friends with him, but he taught her some stuff back then. And she's like, I'm tired of trying to be a good girl, good wife, good mother, good this, good that. Let me be bad. So she tries to be bad with Nicky, but Nicky throws in, hey, like, I have a fiance kind of thing. Because he was in love with her back then, but, like, got his heart broken. And so he throws in the, hey, I have a fiance, so she won't go after him. And that's part of the thing that I struggled with, was him throwing that whole, like, thing in there. Because then while she's under the impression that he's engaged, and while he's pretending that he's engaged, stuff happens between them. And then finally he confesses, like, hey, yeah, no, I never had a fiance. I lied. Sorry. And, like, that's one part that was a problem for me. Another thing is that, based on what I read in the back of the book, I thought it was going to be more supernatural, more, like, magical, because she's, and I'm going to butcher this because it's a Latin American Mexican term, and I'm white, okay? So don't come at me for this. But she's a bruja, I think it's called, like a magical kind of, like, voodoo Latin American, like, witch priestess kind of thing. Again, don't come after me. That's what I remember reading in the back, is that she's that word, and based on what I read, that's what she's supposed to be. But, like, there was, like, less mention of that in this book than I thought it was. It was mentioned, but I thought it was going to be more, like, prevalent and, like, important and more, like, stuff happening, and it wasn't. So I think this is a 3.5 or 3. Like I said, I will post ratings. Guaranteed postings are the ones you can know, for sure. Next was the Amalfi Curse. This one I saw on Instagram. Someone had it. I saw the cover and I said, ooh, that's pretty. I like it. Let me read it. This follows Mari, don't know how her name is pronounced, but she's a Striga. Again, butchered, but basically a sea witch who can control the waves and the tides with certain incantation spells and items. And she lives in a small village on a coast in Italy, or around Italy. And her and a group of women are Strigas who do this, and they try to protect their small town and village from, like, pirates and bad things, and they try to help, like, with fishing and all that. And this big old issue comes around where this brothers who, like, do bad dealings in business keep trying to come around and cause problems in their village, and they're trying to handle it. And she is struggling because her mother drowned and her sister drowned in the water. Her mother first, and then like years later her sister. So she hates the ocean, but she is the most powerful strega in the town, and so she's like relied on and looked on as being like the best and like the one you look up to, the one who's the mentor. Even though she's not that old, she's still kind of young. I think she was like 18, 19 in this book, but she's the most powerful. She's supposed to marry her cousin for riches, and then she's in love with a sailor who she's supposed to run away with so she doesn't have to deal with the responsibility of the thing. And then, yeah, that's her perspective. Hundreds of years later, you meet Haven, who is in the Amalfi region to do a dive for this big old project, to like look under the seas and like map out shipwrecks in the Amalfi area, because there's this curse where like the waters are clear and everything's nice, but for some reason ships sink and people die and all that, and they call it a curse. And so she's there to do that, but she gets kicked off the project because there's issues going on with like the water temperature, and like they believe Vesuvius is gonna erupt and all that. And then she's also there though because her dad, who died a few years earlier, had found treasure there, and he told her about it, and she's trying to fulfill his like last dying wish to go down and see what is going on, where it is, all that. So that one I think was a 3.5 maybe. Next is This Story Might Save Your Life. This one is a book of the month book that I obviously got. This one was kind of mystery thriller. It follows two friends who do a podcast called This Story Might Save Your Life, Benny and Joy. They're best friends. They do this podcast. One will pick a story and say, hey, how do you think you get out of this situation? And then they'll go back and forth asking questions, scenarios, all this. And then they go over a real life story of like how a person did survive said event. But the issue is that one day Joy and Joy's husband Xander go missing, and Benny is trying to figure out like what happened. Like they're a big podcast, they had deals going on, they had all this other troubles too though. So it's like trying to figure out what's going on, what's happening, why are things going on, and like they have a book deal they're trying to write on in the middle as well. And so Benny's trying to figure out what's going on, but in between there's like some stuff that's like suspicious between him and Joy and like all that. And you get Joy's perspective as well, which was interesting. I think I gave this a 3.5, maybe a 3.75. I liked it. It was interesting. There's just some parts where it was kind of annoying and a little bit kind of almost repetitive and stuff. And in some sense too, like you had an idea of how things went, and like it wasn't like 100% predictable, but it was somewhat predictable, but then it was also a little confusing and all that. So it wasn't bad, it was just not the greatest either. Like it was pretty good, pretty decent. So there is that. The last one is Our Ladies of Mysterious Ailments. This is book 2 of a series that I have no clue the name, but the first one was The Library of the Dead. This one follows Ropa, who is a ghost talker. I'm running out of like words right now since this is the second time talking about this stuff. So excuse me. But Ropa is a ghost talker who used to make money to help take care of her grandma and her sister by talking to ghosts and getting their relatives to pay for the messages. She lost that job in the first book, but then she got this like internship, or she became an apprentice to this one guy, and then he in this book offered her an internship, and she thought she was gonna get paid big bucks and all this, but the people who like were doing the internship kind of like gyffed her and like took away her opportunity. So now it's an unpaid internship, and she's really got to find a way to make money because her grandma can't make money and her sister is little and younger, and she's trying to make her sister goes to school. She's like 15 or 16 in this book, by the way. So then she doesn't get money from this internship, but a friend of hers works at this hospital for the magical and says, hey, we got a mysterious thing and these people are willing to help pay you if you can figure out what's going on with their kid. So she goes down that rabbit hole trying to figure it out, learns about all these different schools and their issues and their stuff that's going on. And like there's a lot that happens and goes on in this story. And I think this was a 3.5 or a 3. I want to say a 3.5. But this one is one where like I like the story, I like following it, but it's like one of those things where I feel kind of bad because like there's a lot thrown on Ropa for being 15 and taking care of her grandma and her sister. And I read the first 2 books and I don't remember much being talked about how her dad or her mom, like what happened to them, where they go, what went down. It's always been her grandma and her sister and her. So it's one of those things where I wish I kind of, again, still had a little more background information. But then sometimes, too, there's a lot of things that Ropa goes through where it's like she thinks she knows better and that she can do this. And then it turns out that, like, no, you don't know better. You shouldn't have done this. You should have done this instead. Like, why didn't you do this? Kind of stuff. But, like, in the end, it is interesting and stuff like that. And I know I have the 3rd book out on my shelves. But it's like one of those things too where it's like I'm interested and I want to know, but also it's like one of those things where sometimes too it's just confusing. I don't get it. There's a lot of stuff that's going on at the same time that are somehow usually connected, which I think is funny and kind of interesting, but then it's also like it's one of those things where I don't fully grasp it, I think. But I think the whole point of that is that like the whole series together comes, and that's how you're gonna figure it out, is that once you read the whole series and like everything, like all the little bits in each of the stories will then make sense, if that makes sense. So not a bad book, interesting. I like the way it went. For that, there's some stuff that happened as well that I don't want to like spoil, that I'm curious how that's gonna work for the next book and all that. So those are the 9 books I read in the month of April. I am currently reading a book, but it will go on May's reading wrap up because I won't finish it until May. But thank you guys for watching. If you got this far, let me know if you read any of those books as well. What were your thoughts and feelings on them? Or what books, how many books did you read in April? Were they good? Were they great? Did you get 5 stars? All that. And if you like watching this, make sure you like and subscribe. And I will see you guys next Thursday with some other kind of video. Don't know what it will be yet. But thank you guys for watching, and I will see you again next time. Bye.